Fine time in Belgium. The lifestyle in Brussels was cheap. Nevertheless, the city was beautiful and architecturally impressive. He boarded with the Jacobi sisters, Marie and Suzanne, whose household included a niece who also had the name Suzanne. He arrived in Brussels together with Jose Albert. The Jacobis were delighted with Rizal's presence. He easily became part of the family. Suzanne and Rizal spent a lot of time together in just simple conversations. In this atmosphere of a friendly company, Rizal continued writing El Filibusterismo, the sequel to Noli Me Tangere. As his stay lengthened in the Jacobi residence, affectionate sentiments soon filled the air between him and Suzanne. Rizal was not in favor of whatever it is that he might have made of Suzanne. His friend Valentin Ventura, to whom Rizal sent a sculpture of a naked woman, had noticed a few of romance going on in Brussels. He wondered who could have been the model of Rizal for the sculpted woman. In Brussels, Rizal was busy writing his second novel, which served as the continuation of Noli. In Noli Me Tangere, he initiated action by exposing the cancer present in the society through an accurate depiction of the day-to-day events in his country under the reign of Spanish oppressions. This leads up to El Filibusterismo, his call to revolution, which is the last resort and ultimate resolution against oppression. Aside from writing the chapters of the sequel, he also wrote articles for La Solidaridad and letters to his family and friends. Being a physician, he spent part of his time in the medical clinic. For recreation, he had gymnastics, target practice, and fencing. When Jose Albert left the city, he was replaced by a new boardmate, Jose Alejandrino. La Solidaridad. La Solidaridad became the voice of the propagandist. It heralded the attempt of the Ilustrados to push for liberal reforms in the Philippines. The fortnightly newspaper was founded by Graciano Lopez Haina in Barcelona, Spain, on February 15, 1889. The idea was initially offered to Rizal, but Rizal declined to found it that time, for he was still very busy finishing his annotation of Morga's Accesos de las Islas Filipinas. Nevertheless, Rizal came to be a most valued advisor and supporter of the newspaper. The three main personalities that put forward the endeavor were Jose Rizal, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, and Graciano Lopez Haina. With Rizal far away, Mariano Ponce became a significant contributor to the works for the paper. To protect the interests and welfare of the contributors and writers of the paper, together with their families, against the vindictive schemes of the Spaniards. The propagandists adopted various pseudonyms in La Solidaridad. Some examples are the following: Rizal, Di Masalang Laong-Laan, Marcelo H. Del Pilar, Plaridel, Mariano Ponce, Tikbalang, Nani, and Kalipulaco, Antonio Luna, Tagailog, Jose Mapanganiban, Homapa. The La Solidaridad Articles of Rizal. The first article of Rizal that appeared in the first issue of La Solidaridad was entitled Los Agricultores Filipinos, which described the deplorable condition of the Filipino farmers. The following articles appeared in the later issues. First, La Verdad para Todos, which is the truth for all. Second, Verdades Nuevas, the new truths, in July 31, 1889. Third, Una Profanacion, an attack against the friars for refusing the burial of Mariano Herbosa in a Catholic cemetery. Fourth, Diferencias, which is differences, in September 15, 1889. Fifth, Filipinas dentro de 100 años, which is the Philippines a century hence. Sixth, Ingratitudes, which is Ingratitudes, in January 15, 1890. 7. Sin nombre, which is without name. 8. Sobre la nueva ortografía de la lengua Tagala, which is on the new orthography of the Tagalog language. 9. Cosas de Filipinas, which is things about the Philippines. 10. Sobre la indolencia de los Filipinos, which is on the indolence of the Filipinos. 11. A la defensa, which is to la defensa. 12. Crueldad, which is cruelty.
Printing of the El Filibusterismo. Rizal went back to Brussels by February 1891 to edit and revise his El Filibusterismo. By the end of May, it was ready for the press. Upon learning that printing was cheaper in Gent, Rizal and Alejandrino moved to the city that July. He expected that the Centro de Propaganda would supply him the fund needed for the printing of El Filibusterismo. Nothing, to his disappointment, ever came. He had spent all his money to finish the novel. He also had nothing to fund anymore. All that he received from his countrymen was 100 pesos as part of his allowance from the society. This was where it will end. Rizal, in his letter to Basa, expressed that he was tired of believing in his countrymen. They have made his life miserable with promises that never materialize. Rich people have pledged to finance the publication of his book, and yet, when it was done, they had forgotten him. His position as leader was only good for more than a month, and then they have abandoned him. Rizal was only consoled when, finally, Valentin Ventura agreed to loan him the money enough to finish the printing of the Pili. The novel was printed by F. Mayer Van Loo Press. As a gesture of his appreciation, he gave the original manuscript to Ventura. Rizal dedicated the novel in memory of the three martyrs of freedom, Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora. Rizal resigns. Before leaving for Manila, Rizal sent a letter of his resignation as a contributor to La Solidaridad. In his proclamation, he also sent a message to his compatriots that he was giving up on his political leadership in Spain and would from now on work on his own for the same endeavor. This news saddened many in the propaganda circle. Before his departure from Europe, Rizal made a quick visit to Nelly to say goodbye. Since he could not marry her yet, he might as well go back to the Philippines to take care of the problems of his family. He then proceeded to Marseille. For a trip to Hong Kong, Rizal boarded the ship SS Melbourne.
In the company of friars. Inside the SS Melbourne, of so many passengers that he could have joined cabin with, was a friar that came to accompany him. He was Father Voluntary, an Augustinian who has spent years in the Philippines. Rizal described him as a sort of a Padre Damaso, only kinder. He also met the Father Fuchs and many other friars on board who were together with Father Voluntary.
The Hong Kong practice. Rizal arrived in Hong Kong on November 20, 1891. He was welcomed by Filipino friends including Jose Maria Basa. He established his residence at the Aguilar Street, Red Naxela Terrace on top of a Siemens bar, where he also opened a medical clinic. In his letters to his family, he expressed how much he wanted to return home. If only they would permit him, then he would do so. He was aware of the frustrations and despair they suffered from and would do anything just to be with them. To make this reunion come true, the family conceived a way. A family reunion. A few days before Christmas, Rizal was delighted by the arrival of his father, brother, and Silvestre Ubaldo in Hong Kong. Not long afterwards, his mother and sisters Lucia, Josefa, and Trinidad also arrived. His mother was then 65 years old and was almost blind. She was just again arrested for refusing to use the new surname and had suffered so much from Spanish brutality and injustice. In the Christmas of 1891 in Hong Kong was one of the most joyful celebrations in Rizal's life. For the first time in 4 years, he was finally reunited with his family. Writing to Blumentritt, Rizal mentioned his pleasant life in Hong Kong, being that he was able to secure his family safe and far from persecutions of the government in the Philippines. In order to earn some money for himself and his family, Rizal practiced medicine. In time, Rizal was able to meet other physicians. A new friend, Dr. Lorenzo Marquez, gave a set of clientele with ophthalmic cases to Rizal in recognition to his exceptional talent in his field. In due time, the new doctor in town became successful and popular as a medical practitioner in Hong Kong. He had many patients including foreigners, Asians, or Europeans. Through his continued correspondence with friends abroad, supports in the form of books and equipments started to come in. For the second time, he operated on his mother's eye so that she may be able to read and write again. Rizal's other writings. Alongside his practice, Rizal continued to write. As he browsed along the individual rights the Spaniards have violated against his people, Rizal came to the idea of translating into Tagalog the rights of man, as proclaimed by the French Revolution in 1789. Rizal, in addition, wrote A la Nación Española, or To the Spanish Nation, an appeal to Spain to rectify the wrongs done by the Spaniards against the Calamba tenants. To expose the brutality of the offense committed against the Calamba tenants sa mga kababayan, or To My Countrymen, was written in December 1891. It explained the Calamba agrarian situation. Rizal also, through Frazier Smith, one of its editors, contributed articles to the Hong Kong Telegraph, a British newspaper. When copies of the newspaper entered the Philippines, wherein many Filipinos were able to read Rizal's articles, the Spanish censors, upon discovering his writings, had immediately banned the Hong Kong newspaper. In March 1892, Rizal wrote Una Visita a la Victoria Gaol, or A Visit to Victoria Gaol. It was an account to his visit to the colonial prison of Hong Kong. In this article, he compared the cruel Spanish prison system with that of the modern and more humane British system.
The Second Homecoming. In the noon of June 26, 1892, Rizal and his widowed sister Lucia, wife of the late Mariano Herbosa, arrived in Manila. They were met by many carabineers, headed by a major. There were in addition a captain and a sergeant of the veteran Civil Guard. He came down with his luggage and they inspected him at the custom house. From there, he and Lucia went to Hotel de Orient where they occupied a room. In the afternoon, he proceeded to the Malacañang Palace to seek audience with the Spanish Governor-General Eulogio Desfujol. He was told to come back at night at 7. Promptly, he returned to Malacañang and was able to confer with Governor-General Desfujol, who agreed to pardon his father but not his brother and brother-in-law. The governor told him to return on Wednesday, June 29.
A trip to Luzon. On June 27, Rizal boarded a train at the Tutuban station for a trip to the provinces. He visited his friends in Malolos, Bulacan, San Fernando, Pampanga, Tarlac, and Bacolor, Pampanga. He was welcomed and lavishly entertained at the homes of his friends. These friends were good patriots, his supporters in the Reform Crusade. In this occasion, he took the opportunity to greet them personally and discuss the problem affecting their people. Rizal returned by train to Manila the next day. Whether he knew it or not, he was followed by government spies who watched carefully his every move. The homes he had visited were later raided by the Guardia Civil, wherein they seized copies of the Nolen Fili and other subversive pamphlets.
The founding of the La Liga Filipina. In the evening of Sunday, July 3, 1892, following his morning interview with Governor General Despujol, Rizal attended a meeting of patriots at the home of the Chinese Filipino mestizo Doroteo Onjuco on Elias Street, Tondo, Manila. Among those present were Pedro Serrano Loctao, or Panday Pira, a Mason and school teacher, Domingo Franco or Felipe Real, Mason and tobacco shopkeeper, Jose A. Ramos or Socorro, engraver, printer, owner of Bazaar Gran Bretana, and first worshipful master of Nilad. First Filipino Masonic Lodge, Ambrosio Salvador, Gobernadorcillo or Quiapo and Mason, Bonifacio Arevalo or Harem, dentist and Mason, Deodato Arellano, brother-in-law of M. H. Del Pilar and civilian employee in the army, Ambrosio Flores or Musa, retired lieutenant of infantry, Agustin de la Rosa, bookkeeper and mason, Luis Villarreal, tailor and mason, Faustino Villaruel or Ilaw, pharmacist and mason, Mariano Crisostomo, landlord, Numeriano Adriano or Ipil, notary public and mason, Estanislao Legazpi, artisan and mason, Teodoro Plata, court clerk and mason, Andres Bonifacio, warehouse employee, Apolinario Mabini or Katabay, lawyer and mason, Juan Zulueta, playwright, poet, and a government employee.
The initiation. Rizal explained the objectives of the La Liga Filipina, a civic league of Filipinas, which he desired to establish and make its role in the socio-economic life of the people. He presented the constitution of the Liga, which he had written in Hong Kong, and discussed its provisions. The patriots were favorably impressed and gladly approved the establishment of the La Liga. The officers of the new league were elected as follows: Ambrosio Salvador, which is the president, Deodato Arellano, the secretary, Bonifacio Arevalo, the treasurer, and Agustin de la Rosa, fiscal. The aims of La Liga Filipina were the following: first, a united whole archipelago forming one compact and homogeneous body. Second, mutual protection in every want and necessity. Third, defense against all violence and injustice. Fourth, formation of education, agriculture, and commerce. Fifth, furtherance of the study and application of reforms. The motto of the La Liga Filipina was Unus Imstar Omnium, which is one like all.
The Liga Government. The governing body of the League was the Supreme Council, which had jurisdiction over the whole country. It was composed of the President, a Secretary, a Treasurer, and a Fiscal. There was a provincial council in every province and a popular council in every town. The duties of the Liga Filipina members are as follows: 1. Obey the orders of the Supreme Council. 2. Help in recruiting new members. 3. Keep in strictest secrecy the decision of the Liga authorities. 4. Have a symbolic name which cannot be changed until one becomes the president of the council. 5. Report to the fiscal anything that may be heard, which that affects the Liga. 6. Behave well as befits a good Filipino. And 7. Help fellow members in all ways.
Dapitan Exile. Rizal lived in exile in faraway Dapitan. a remote town in Mindanao which was under the missionary jurisdiction of the Jesuits from 1892 to 1896. This 4-year interlude in his life was tediously unexciting, but was abundantly fruitful with varied achievements. He practiced medicine, pursued scientific studies, continued his artistic and literary works and commerce, widened his knowledge of languages, established a school for boys, promoted community development projects, invented a wooden machine for making bricks, and engaged in farming. And the steamer Cebu, which brought Rizal to Dapitan, carried a letter from Father Pablo Pastels, superior of the Jesuit Society of the Philippines, to Father Antonio Obac, Jesuit parish priest of Dapitan. In his letter, Father Superior Pastels informed Obac that Rizal could live at the parish convent on the following conditions: A. That Rizal publicly retract his errors concerning religion and make statements that were clearly pro-Spanish and against revolution. B. That he performs the church rites and make a general confession of his past life. C. That he conducts himself in an exemplary manner as a Spanish subject and a man of religion. Rizal did not agree with these conditions and had just preferred to stay in Casa Real, the residence of the commandant Captain Camisero, or the warden.
A new friend. Camisero was fascinated by Rizal's fine qualities and personality. He came to know that Rizal was not a common felon, much less a filibustero. So fond of Rizal, he gave good reports on his prisoner to Governor Despuhol and even gave him complete freedom to go anywhere and to report only once a week to his office. Rizal, on the other hand, admired the kind and generous Spanish captain, and as evidence of his esteem, Rizal wrote a poem, a Don Ricardo Camisero, in August 26, 1892, on the occasion of the captain's birthday.
The birth of Katipunan. Right after the banishment of Rizal to Dapitan, the members of the Liga Pilipina met once more to discuss the future of the organization and what moves to make in order to continue their patriotic cause. In this meeting, the members were divided as to what should be the next step. Some proposed that the Liga continues its cause for reforms. Somehow, this was not the view of the others. The company of Ambrosio Salvador believed that there was still hope for reforms. On the other hand, Deodato Arellano and Andres Bonifacio and the rest saw the Liga as Rizal's initial effort to an eventual separation from Spain. The Liga was eventually divided as those who still believed in reforms and founded the Compañerismo. Those who believed in the more radical actions against Spain separated to organize a secret organization called the Katipunan. Arellano and Bonifacio, with Ladislao Diwa and Teodoro Plata, founded the organization.
Rizal won Lotto. In September 21, 1892, the sleepy town of Dapitan burst in excitement when a mailboat in Butuan approached the town. It brought no Spanish officials, but only the happy tidings that the lottery ticket number 9736, jointly owned by Captain Carcinero, Dr. Rizal, and Francisco Equilor, a Spanish resident of Dipolog, a neighboring town of Dapitan, won the second prize of 20,000 pesos in the government-owned Manila Lottery. Rizal's share of the winning lottery ticket was 6,200 pesos. Upon receiving this sum, he gave 2,000 pesos to his friend Basa in Hong Kong, and the rest he invested well by purchasing agricultural lands along the coast of Talisay, about 1 kilometer away from Dapitan.
The physician. Rizal practiced medicine in Dapitan. Patients came everywhere in the Visayas and Mindanao. He treated the poor for free, and for the rich and the noble, he asked consultation fees and payment for the medicines. As he continued to make miracles in treating the eye, his name became popular even to the far North Luzon and even Hong Kong. He operated his mother's right eye and it was successful, but later on the wound became infected due to improper care. Fortunately, through Rizal was able to finally restore Doña Teodora's sight.
Community projects. When Rizal arrived in Dapitan, he decided to improve it. Seeing the potential of Dapitan, he began to work on converting part of the town park. To do this task, Rizal had to clear the lands of weeds and other obstacles, uniform the plants, and plant additional flowers. The park was highlighted by a relief map of Mindanao, which he constructed out of the soil. Added to this, the 500 pesos which an English patient paid him was used by him to equip the town with its lighting system. The lighting system consisted of a coconut oil lamps placed in the dark streets of Dapitan. Electric lighting was unknown then in the Philippines. It was only until 1894 when Manila saw the first electric lights. To make water easily more available to the people, he constructed the town's first water system, wherein he used bamboos as pipelines. He also spent many months training the marshes to get rid of malaria that had always infested Dapitan.
The educator and a man of arts and science, Rizal wanted to make a difference in the lives of the people of Dapitan. He believed that changes may be introduced through education. In 1893, he established a school for boys which existed until the end of his exile. Rizal did not allow his 16 pupils to pay any tuition. Instead, he only wanted to teach them whatever it is that he knew so that these children may grow to become enlightened to the truth. As an educator, he continued to study by reading books that his friends from Manila and Europe would send him. He also made scientific researches by collecting various species of plants and animal life on land and water, which he would later send abroad to his friends, like Mayer and Virchow, for recording. 3 of such species he sent were given to his credit. They were a beetle, a frog, and a dragonfly. Always being curious of what he would come up with, Rizal made a couple of inventions. They include a lighter that ignites through stones and a brick maker. As an artist, Rizal made a lot of sketches which mostly featured the flora and fauna of Mindanao. A number of sculptures were carved while he was in Dapitan. They are namely The Mother's Revenge, a tribute to his dog Syria, whose a child was killed by a crocodile, The Dapitan Girl, a wood carving of Josephine's image, and the busts of Father Guerico and St. Paul.
An agriculturist and entrepreneur. Coming from a family of farmers, Rizal made himself busy in managing the vast lands that he purchased in Talisay, which covered around 70 hectares. He was able to purchase these lands through the money won in the lottery. Though sad and lonely, Rizal spent his days fruitful by diligently farming his lands together with a number of helpers. Here he planted coconut, abaca, cacao, corn, sugarcane, and fruit trees. Seeing the potential of the abaca industry, he made a partnership with a businessman, Ramon Carrion. Rizal also indulged himself in fishery through a fish pond that he also purchased.
A period of pain. The life of Rizal in Dapitan may be generalized as somehow unhappy. Years have passed and this made him miss his family so much, especially those who never ever had the opportunity of visiting him. It had been a long time since he saw his father, brother, and other sisters. The only consolation to him was the arrival of his mother and 3 sisters who stayed with him together with some of his nephews for his company and assistance. Rizal had always been sad because of what has happened to his life and his family. He was also sad because nothing good has ever happened to his country and people. Leonor Rivera died in August of 1893, and this even created a terrible pain in his heart. A mixture of disappointment and guilt were what he felt for he was never there for him.
A beautiful stranger, dulce extranjera. Since 1892, everything had been routine in the life of Rizal. Love was never something that he thought about for some time. But all this was about to change when one time someone came along. She was Josephine Bracken, an Irish girl of sweet 18. Her mother died in childbirth and was adopted by Mr. George Taufer, who later became blind. When they heard about the famous ophthalmic surgeon Dr. Rizal, they went to Dapitan for his advice with the Filipina companion Manuela Orlac. As days passed, Rizal and Josephine fell in love with each other. It was at first sight, and after 1 month of courtship, they already have planned not to separate and get married. They asked the permission of Mr. Taufer, but he flared up in violent rage and attempted to commit suicide. It was fortunate that Rizal was able to stop him. When Rizal broke the news that Mr. Taufer's blindness was incurable, the latter planned to come back to Hong Kong. Mr. Taufer returned to Hong Kong and Josephine assisted him to Manila. Here, Josephine stayed with Rizal's family. After a while, she returned to Dapitan and reunited with Rizal. The two planned to be married in a Catholic ceremony. However, Father Antonio Obac insisted that Rizal must first retract and embrace the faith once more before any ceremony. Rizal refused, for he would not give up his personal beliefs just for a personal favor. With no priest or church, Rizal and Josephine married themselves as God was their witness. The two led a happy life for quite some time in Dapitan until there was such time that the two discovered their differences. Being a Catholic, Josephine often went to the parish church. Here, many, including Rizal's sister, have seen Josephine having conversation with the friars therein. Rizal was informed of such activities of his wife. With his sisters not really liking Josephine from the very start, news and comments reached Rizal in an assimilated manner. Rizal began to become paranoid, even suspecting his wife as a spy to the friars who may have been hired against him. Heated arguments between the couple started to become frequent.
Rizal's son. Rizal loved Josephine. However, due to the problems the two recently faced, Josephine grew to become worrisome and always frightened of what may happen to the relationship. This became a reason why Josephine prematurely gave birth to their baby at the 8th month. Rizal tried to save his baby but to no avail. Rizal's son only lived for around 3 hours. He named the baby Francisco after his father. So much was Rizal's grief that he had to bury his own child. Sometime after the delivery, Josephine left Rizal and proceeded to Manila. Rizal made all the efforts to take her back though.
Dapitan writings. Rizal's exile gave way for him to write once more. Hymno a Talisay, or Hymn to the Talisay Tree, was a hymn written in tribute of a tree to which a town was named after and where Rizal often stayed. Rizal and his students have always used the Talisay tree as a meeting place and in grateful appreciation of the shade he provided, they would occasionally sing the hymn. The other poems Rizal wrote are Mi Retiro or My Retreat, which depicts his life as an exile in Dapitan, and Canto del Viajero or Song of the Traveler, a poem celebrating his renewed opportunity to travel abroad and the end of exile in Dapitan.
The Revolution of 1896 and Rizal. Since the beginning of the Cuban Revolution in 1895, the Katipunan had been contemplating on the idea that a revolution was also inevitable in the Philippines. With the Cubans fighting the Spaniards in the other side of the Pacific, it would be a great advantage for the Filipinos to strike as well at the same time, for it is when Spain would have divided attention and strength. In a meeting at the Montalban Cave in April of 1896, Bonifacio and the Katipunan made a decision that the revolution had already came to pass. On the 2nd of May, the Katipunan Supreme Council chose Dr. Pio Valenzuela as its official emissary to Dapitan. Valenzuela's objective was to convince Rizal to join and lead the Katipunan since it was he who had been identified by the Filipinos as their true savior and leader. In June 21, 1896, after a week-long travel, Valenzuela arrived in Dapitan. In order to successfully pass the securing of the inspecting officials, Valenzuela brought along a blind man named Raimundo Mata to act as a patient. Eventually, they were able to see Dr. Rizal. Because Rizal did not know who he was, Valenzuela introduced himself first. Later on, the Katipunero disclosed the true purpose of his arrival and the nature of the Katipunan. At the end of the rather long conversation of the two, Rizal expressed that he did not adhere to the idea of the Katipunan. He believed that the Katipunan has no capability of defeating the much powerful Spanish army on the reasons that 1. The Katipunan does not have enough arms to fight the well-equipped enemy. 2. The Katipuneros do not have enough skills and training to fight an army veteran in engaging in battles. And 3. Its hierarchy lacked credibility, which may result only to confusion in the chain of command among leaders.
The Last Hours. The Last Hours of Rizal is an episode in the life of the hero, of which only the Jesuits and some Spanish officials, who were the only ones allowed to be present, can make a full account of. Though the account had caused much controversy concerning the eventual religious stand of Rizal in the final moments of his life, it is important that it must be presented so as to provide the reader a way of reasoning to himself whether or not he will believe it. The reader must also be guided that the Masons and some other Rizalists find it difficult to accept the story that follows. At 6 o'clock a.m. of December 29, 1986, Captain Rafael Dominguez, who was designated by Gov. Camilo Polavieja to take charge of all arrangements for the execution of the condemned prisoner, read the death sentence to Rizal. He was informed that the manner of execution was that he was to be shot at the back by a firing squad at 7 o'clock a.m. in Bagumpayan, Luneta. At 7 o'clock a.m., an hour after the reading of the death sentence, Rizal was moved to the prison chapel. It is here where he spent his last moments. His first visitors were Father Miguel Cedera Mata, rector of Ateneo Municipal, and Father Luis Visa, Jesuits professor. At 7:15, Rizal happily received from Visa the statuette Sacred Heart of Jesus, which he carved when he was still in Ateneo. He placed it on his writing table. At 8 o'clock a.m., Father Antonio Rizal arrived to relieve Father Visa. Rizal invited Rizal to join him for breakfast. After breakfast, Rizal's defense counsel came, whom he thanked for the gallant service rendered. By 9 o'clock a.m., Father Federico Faura arrived. From 12 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., Rizal was left alone in his cell. He took his lunch, and after which, he was busy writing. It was probably during this time that he finished his farewell poem and hid it at the alcohol-formed stove. At the same time, he wrote his last letter to Professor Blumentritt. At 3:30 p.m., Father Vicente Balaguer arrived to discuss religious matter with Rizal.
The agony of a mother. At 4, Rizal's mother arrived. Rizal knelt down before her and kissed her hands, begging her to forgive him. The two were immediately separated by the guards. Shortly afterwards, Trinidad came in and Rizal gave him the alcohol lamp which contained the farewell poem. Right after his mother and sister left, Fathers Villa Clara and March entered the cell. Don Silvino Lopez Tunon, Dean of the Manila Cathedral, arrived at 6 p.m. Fathers Ballagur March and Villa Clara took turns in accompanying Rizal. By 8 a.m., visitor came. It was Fiscal Gaspar Sestano of Royal Audiencia. Whatever was the purpose of this man's visit was not clear. Rizal may still have sought for some legal moves to, at least, postpone the execution.
The Martyrdom of Rizal. Around 6:30 a.m., Rizal, elegantly dressed in black, began his death march. Cuff tied by his elbows, Rizal walked on through with all serenity. Together with him was Luis Tavel de Andrade on one side, and Friars Villa Clara and March on the other. In front of them were the 4 advance guards with drawn bayonets. There were only a number of people who were there from the fort to Plaza del Patio. By the time they arrived to Bagong Bayan, a multitude was already gathered to watch the execution. As they walked on, Rizal greeted the loveliness of the morning, the clearness of the mountains of Cavite and Corregidor. He even made a last glance of the Ateneo and talked about it with the friars. When the cabalsado arrived at Bagong Bayan, they proceeded to a square. In front of a squad, which another squad was at the back, Rizal was made to stand 10 paces apart. He bade goodbye to his defender and the priests and shook their hands. One of the priests offered a crucifix to be kissed, and Rizal kissed it. Rizal turned to the official present to request that he be allowed to face the fiery squad. The official explained that it cannot be done. Strict instructions state that he would be shot at the back. When the blindfold was presented to him, he swayed his head to indicate that he did not want to. This one request was granted. Rizal turned his back to the firing squad and faced the sea. A Spanish military physician, Dr. Felipe Ruiz Castillo, approached Rizal to feel his pulse. Rizal graciously complied. Dr. Castillo found it normal, showing only that Rizal did not fear death. It was a standard procedure to see first if the person to be executed is well. This was due to the fact that there have been many incidences that a person for execution would fall even before the shots are made due to cardiac arrest. This defeats the purpose of execution. The death raffles of the drums began. Above the drum beats, the sharp commands, ready, aim, fire, preparado, amputin, fuego, were heard, and the bullets from the 4-man squad ripped through his back. Rizal, with all effort, turned his bullet-riddled body to the right and fell on the ground dead, with back flat on the grass and face upward, fronting the morning sun with half-closed eyes. It was 7:03 in the morning when he died. Rizal, aged 35 years, 5 months and 11 days. After the hero's execution, the Spanish spectators shouted, "Viva España! Muerte a los traidores!" and the Spanish military band, joining the jubilance over Rizal's death, played the triumphant Marcha de Cadiz. Rizal's body was quickly loaded to a carriage. As he instructed it, many of his followers followed the carriage, of which destination was unknown. The sisters of Rizal, however painful it was, managed to approach the site of his death to retrieve the blood that flowed, and flesh and clothes that teared from the soil. Rizal's body went directly to the Paco cemetery, dumped on a shallow grave without coffin, and left without a name. There were no ceremonies of any kind. The family members were not even notified where the body was to be buried. Narcisa and company had to look over many cemeteries before they finally discovered it in Paco. The loyal followers of Rizal quickly remedied the rude treatment by properly burying him with only the letters RPJ written on a wooden crucifix established on the top of the site.